Have you ever wondered why some people seem impossible to manipulate? Why criticism doesn't break them? Why pressure doesn't move them? Why fear doesn't control them? Why guilt doesn't trap them? And why no matter what happens around them, they remain calm, focused, and free? The answer might surprise you. It's not because they are stronger than everyone else. It's because they stopped obeying things that most people obey every single day. They stopped obeying fear. They stopped obeying approval. They stopped obeying pressure. They stopped obeying emotions. And once they did, nobody could control their minds. Think about that. The greatest prison in the world has no walls. It exists inside the mind. And millions of people live there without realizing it. A person can be financially free and mentally imprisoned. A person can have opportunities and still be trapped. A person can have talent and never use it because invisible chains are holding them back. The saddest part? Most people don't even know the chains exist. Before we continue, subscribe to the Stoic Path and join a community dedicated to discipline, wisdom, self-mastery, and becoming stronger every day. Now let's begin. There was once a young man who constantly worried about what people thought of him. Every decision was influenced by opinions. Every action required approval. Every goal depended on acceptance. When people praised him, he felt happy. When people criticized him, he felt miserable. His entire emotional state depended on strangers. One day an older mentor asked him a simple question. Who controls your mind? The young man answered immediately. I do. The mentor smiled. No. The young man looked confused. The mentor continued. If compliments make you happy and criticism makes you miserable, then other people control your emotions. Silence. The young man had never thought about it that way. The mentor continued. If your mood changes every time someone approves of you or rejects you, your mind belongs to them. That lesson changed his life. And it can change yours too. Most people think control looks obvious. They imagine dictators, bosses, authority figures. But control often appears in subtle forms. A comment, an opinion, a fear, a trend, a social expectation, a need for validation. And before you realize it, you're living according to someone else's script. The first thing you must stop obeying is the need to be liked. This is one of the most dangerous addictions in the world. Because unlike drugs or alcohol, society rewards it. People applaud people-pleasing. They celebrate self-sacrifice. They encourage approval-seeking. Yet these habits slowly destroy freedom. Imagine carrying a mirror everywhere you go. Every few minutes you check it. Not because you're interested in yourself, but because you're worried about how others see you. Exhausting, isn't it? That's how many people live mentally. Constantly checking. Constantly adjusting. Constantly performing. Constantly seeking approval. And the result is predictable. They lose themselves. The Stoics understood something powerful. You cannot be free if your happiness depends on someone else's opinion. Freedom begins when approval becomes optional. Not when everyone likes you. But when you no longer need everyone to like you. That is real power. There was a fisherman who spent years trying to impress the villagers. He bought expensive clothes. He exaggerated stories. He tried to fit in. But no matter what he did, someone always criticized him. One day he became tired. Very tired. He stopped performing. Stopped pretending. Stopped chasing approval. And something interesting happened. His life became peaceful. The criticism didn't disappear. But his suffering did. Because suffering was never coming from the criticism. It came from obedience to it. Remember that. Most pain comes from obedience. not circumstances. The second thing you must stop obeying is fear. Fear is useful when danger is real. But most fear today isn't protecting people. It's controlling them. Fear says, don't start. Don't speak. Don't try. Don't risk. Don't change. Don't grow. Stay where you are. Stay comfortable. Stay small. Fear disguises itself as safety. But often it becomes a prison. There is a story about a bird born inside a cage. Every day the cage door was open. The bird could leave. The sky was available. Freedom was available. But it never flew away. Why? Because the cage felt familiar. The bird wasn't trapped by bars. It was trapped by conditioning. Many people live exactly like that. The opportunity is there. The possibility is there. The freedom is there. But fear keeps them inside invisible cages. And here's the tragedy. The longer you obey fear, the stronger fear becomes. The longer you challenge fear, the weaker fear becomes. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's refusing to obey it. That's a huge difference. Strong people feel fear. They simply don't allow fear to make decisions. Weak people hand the steering wheel to fear. And then wonder why their lives never change. The third thing you must stop obeying is emotional impulses. This is where many lives fall apart. A person gets angry. They react. They regret it. A person feels rejected. They panic. They make desperate decisions. A person feels insecure. They seek validation. They lose their dignity. The emotion itself wasn't the problem. Obedience was. Imagine your emotions as passengers in a car. Fear sits in the back. Anger sits beside it. Anxiety sits near the window. Sadness occasionally joins the ride. The problem begins when one of those passengers grabs the steering wheel. Now the journey becomes dangerous. Wise people allow emotions to ride with them. Foolish people allow emotions to drive them. That distinction changes everything. A Stoic understands that emotions are information, not commands. Read that again. Emotions are information, not commands. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean you should attack. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean you should quit. Just because you feel insecure doesn't mean you should seek approval. Feelings deserve attention, but not automatic obedience. And that brings us to one of the most powerful truths you'll ever learn. The person who controls your reactions controls you. Think about it carefully. If someone can make you angry whenever they want, they control you. If someone can manipulate your emotions whenever they want, they control you. If someone can ruin your peace with a single sentence, they control you. This is why emotional mastery is freedom. A man once visited a wise teacher and complained about his enemies. They keep insulting me. The teacher listened quietly. Then asked a strange question. If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, who owns the gift? The person who offered it. The teacher nodded. The same is true for insults. The man sat silently. The lesson was clear. Not everything offered to you deserves acceptance. Not every opinion deserves attention. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every battle deserves participation. The strongest people understand this. They choose carefully what enters their minds. Because they know that attention is power. And whatever receives your attention receives your energy. Many people are exhausted because they are fighting battles that don't matter. Arguments that don't matter. Opinions that don't matter. Drama that doesn't matter. Distractions that don't matter. And every day they wonder why they feel drained. Because they are obeying everything. Every notification. Every criticism. Every temptation. Every emotional impulse. Every distraction. Meanwhile, disciplined people do something different. They become selective. Very selective. They ask themselves, does this deserve my attention? Does this deserve my energy? Does this deserve my peace? Most of the time, the answer is no. And that's why they remain calm while others remain overwhelmed. The next lesson may be uncomfortable. But it is necessary. Many people are not controlled by others. They are controlled by comfort. Comfort is one of the most persuasive masters in existence. It whispers softly. Start tomorrow. Take it easy. Skip today. You deserve a break. And before you know it, years have passed. Dreams remain unfinished. Goals remain distant. Potential remains unused. Not because of enemies. Not because of bad luck. Because comfort was obeyed too often. The strongest people understand that growth and comfort rarely live in the same place. Every meaningful achievement requires discomfort. Every transformation requires discomfort. Every breakthrough requires discomfort. And those who refuse discomfort often refuse growth. The question becomes simple. Who are you obeying? Fear? Approval? Comfort? Emotions? Or wisdom? Because your answer determines your future. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper into the hidden forms of mental control, how society programs your thinking, why most people unknowingly surrender their freedom, and the Stoic principles that make a person truly impossible to manipulate. Sometimes the greatest rebellion isn't against the world. It's against the habits that have been controlling your mind for years. Welcome back. If there's one lesson you should remember from the first part, it's this. Every day, something is trying to control your mind. Fear. Comfort. Approval. Emotions. Distractions. The question is not whether influence exists. The question is whether you recognize it before it takes control. Because the greatest manipulation is the one you never notice. Let's continue. One of the most powerful forms of control is identity. Most people spend their lives obeying labels. I'm not confident. I'm shy. I'm unlucky. I'm not smart enough. I'm not a leader. I'm just an average person. Notice something important. The moment you repeatedly tell yourself who you are, your mind begins acting accordingly. Your identity becomes a prison. Not because it's true. Because you believe it's true. There was once an elephant raised in captivity. When it was young, a small rope was tied around its leg. The elephant tried to escape. Again. And again. And again. But it couldn't. Eventually, it stopped trying. Years passed. The elephant grew enormous. Strong enough to break trees. Strong enough to pull down walls. Yet it remained tied to the same rope. Not because the rope was strong. Because the belief was. The elephant had become obedient to a limitation that no longer existed. How many people live exactly like that? They could change careers. But don't. They could start businesses. But don't. They could transform their lives. But don't. Not because they can't. Because somewhere in the past they accepted a story about themselves. And now they obey it. Never underestimate the power of a belief. Your mind will always search for evidence to support what you already believe. If you believe you're weak, your brain will find proof. If you believe you're incapable, your brain will find proof. If you believe you're powerful, your brain will find proof. The story you tell yourself becomes the reality you experience. This is why self-awareness matters. Because many people are not living according to truth. They're living according to old programming. And that programming is controlling everything. Another thing you must stop obeying is the crowd. This is difficult because humans naturally seek belonging. We want acceptance. We want connection. We want community. Nothing is wrong with that. The danger begins when belonging becomes more important than truth. History is full of examples. Entire groups followed ideas they knew were wrong. People stayed silent when they should have spoken. People followed crowds instead of conscience. People obeyed popularity instead of wisdom. Why? Because standing alone is uncomfortable. But the Stoics understood something powerful. If you always think like the crowd, you'll always live like the crowd. And the crowd is often confused. The crowd chases trends. The crowd follows emotions. The crowd seeks comfort. The crowd reacts. The crowd panics. The crowd complains. If you want extraordinary results, you cannot allow the crowd to think for you. You must learn independent thinking. And independent thinking requires courage. Because sometimes the right path feels lonely. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that the opinions of others are outside his control. Imagine the freedom in that. Imagine waking up every day and realizing you don't need universal agreement. You don't need everyone's approval. You don't need permission to become who you're meant to be. That realization changes everything. Now let's discuss something even more dangerous. Victim mentality. This mindset quietly destroys millions of lives. Victim mentality teaches people that everything is someone else's fault. Their parents. Their boss. Their childhood. Their circumstances. Their partner. Their luck. Everyone else becomes responsible for their life. And the result? Powerlessness. Because the moment you blame everything outside yourself, you surrender the power to change anything. There was a farmer whose crops failed after a storm. His neighbor experienced the same storm. The first farmer spent months complaining. The second farmer spent months rebuilding. One focused on blame. The other focused on action. A year later their lives looked completely different. The storm affected both men. Their response created the difference. Life is not always fair. Everyone knows that. But freedom begins when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And start asking, "What can I do about it?" That question returns power to your hands. And power is exactly what victim mentality steals. Another hidden controller of the mind is comparison. This one is especially dangerous today. Everywhere you look, people are comparing. Comparing money. Comparing success. Comparing relationships. Comparing appearances. Comparing lifestyles. And the result is endless dissatisfaction. Think about it. You could be living a wonderful life. Then suddenly see someone who appears to have more. Instantly, gratitude disappears. Peace disappears. Contentment disappears. Nothing changed except your comparison. The Stoics taught that happiness comes from focusing on what you control. Comparison focuses on what you don't control. That's why comparison creates suffering. Imagine running a race while constantly looking sideways. What happens? You slow down. You lose balance. You become distracted. Life works the same way. The people making the greatest progress are often too busy improving themselves to obsess over everyone else. Remember this. Your competition is not another person. Your competition is who you were yesterday. Beat that person consistently. And your life will transform. Now let's talk about silence. Most people underestimate silence. They think power comes from speaking. Explaining. Arguing. Defending. Justifying. But often power comes from restraint. There is tremendous strength in silence. Manipulative people want reactions. Toxic people want engagement. Attention seekers want participation. And sometimes the most powerful response is none at all. Not because you're weak. Because you're disciplined. A lion does not turn around every time a dog barks. Think about that. If you react to everything, you become controlled by everything. The ability to remain silent when provoked is one of the highest forms of self-mastery. Not every criticism deserves a defense. Not every attack deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Sometimes peace is worth more than being understood. The next lesson is one of the most important in this entire video. Protect your attention. Attention is the currency of your life. Whatever receives your attention receives your time. Whatever receives your time receives your energy. Whatever receives your energy influences your future. This is why distraction is so dangerous. Distraction doesn't look harmful. It feels harmless. One video. One scroll. One notification. One interruption. But small distractions repeated daily create massive consequences. Years later people wonder where their dreams went. The answer is simple. Their attention was stolen. Guard your attention. Guard it fiercely. Because your future depends on it. Imagine two people. One spends 5 years mastering a skill. The other spends 5 years distracted. Which person becomes powerful? The answer is obvious. Focus creates power. Distraction creates weakness. This is why the strongest minds are selective about what enters them. Selective about information. Selective about relationships. Selective about influences. Selective about environments. They understand a simple truth. Everything you consume eventually consumes part of you. Choose wisely. As we approach the end of this journey, there is one final lesson. Perhaps the most important lesson of all. Nobody can control a person who has mastered themselves. Read that slowly. Nobody can control a person who has mastered themselves. Not fear. Not temptation. Not approval. Not criticism. Not pressure. Not manipulation. Not circumstances. Self-mastery is the ultimate freedom. And self-mastery begins with awareness. Awareness of your thoughts. Awareness of your emotions. Awareness of your habits. Awareness of your weaknesses. Because what remains unconscious controls you. What becomes conscious can be changed. Every day ask yourself. What am I obeying? Fear or courage? Comfort or growth? Approval or authenticity? Emotion or wisdom? Excuses or responsibility? Because your answers create your destiny. The strongest people in the world are not those who dominate others. They are those who dominate themselves. They don't need to control anyone. Because they have learned the harder task. They have learned to control their own minds. And once you achieve that, the world changes. Criticism loses power. Fear loses power. Manipulation loses power. Distractions lose power. Pressure loses power. Because your mind no longer belongs to them. It belongs to you. Before you leave, subscribe to the Stoic Path and join thousands of people committed to discipline, wisdom, emotional mastery, and personal growth. Remember, the greatest victory is not over another person. The greatest victory is over the part of yourself that keeps surrendering control. Master your mind. Master your life. And nobody will ever control you again. There is one final truth that very few people ever understand. The people who control the world are not necessarily the people with the most money. Not necessarily the people with the most power. Not necessarily the people with the most followers. The people who control the world are often the people who understand the human mind. Because if someone can influence the way you think, they can influence the way you act. And if they can influence the way you act, they can influence the direction of your life. This is why protecting your mind is one of the most important responsibilities you will ever have. Every day, there are voices competing for your attention. Some want your money. Some want your approval. Some want your loyalty. Some want your emotions. Some want your time. And many of them want something far more valuable. Your ability to think for yourself. The Stoics warned against this long ago. They understood that the average person drifts through life reacting to everything. A headline changes their mood. A comment ruins their day. A setback destroys their confidence. An opinion changes their direction. They become leaves blowing in the wind. No stability. No center. No control. But the Stoic chooses a different path. The Stoic becomes the tree. The storm arrives. The wind blows. The rain falls. Yet the tree remains rooted. Not because the storm is weak. Because the roots are strong. And your roots are your principles. Your values. Your discipline. Your character. When these things are strong, outside events lose much of their power over you. A man once asked a wise teacher, "How do I become mentally strong?" The teacher replied, "Stop giving small things big power." The man looked confused. The teacher continued, "Most people are not defeated by major disasters. They are defeated by daily distractions. A rude comment. A small setback. A little rejection. A temporary failure. A moment of discomfort. And slowly they surrender their peace." The lesson is simple. Life becomes easier when you stop treating every inconvenience like a catastrophe. One of the greatest signs of maturity is emotional stability. When everything doesn't require a reaction. When everything doesn't offend you. When everything doesn't upset you. When everything doesn't become a crisis. That is power. Imagine two people facing the same problem. One panics. Complains. Blames. Overreacts. The other pauses. Observes. Thinks. Responds calmly. Who has the advantage? Always the second person. Because clear thinking beats emotional thinking. Every single time. The strongest minds are not the loudest minds. They are the calmest minds. This is why silence is so important. Silence helps you hear your own thoughts. Silence helps you think clearly. Silence helps you separate truth from noise. Many people fear silence because silence forces them to face themselves. It forces them to confront their habits. Their fears. Their weaknesses. Their excuses. But growth begins where excuses end. The day you stop blaming circumstances and start taking responsibility is the day your life changes. Responsibility sounds heavy. But it is actually freedom. Because if you are responsible for improving your life, then you also have the power to improve it. And power is far better than helplessness. Think about your future self for a moment. 5 years from now. 10 years from now. Who will that person become? The answer depends on what controls your mind today. If fear controls you, your future will shrink. If comfort controls you, your future will stagnate. If distraction controls you, your future will scatter. But if discipline controls you, if wisdom controls you, if purpose controls you, then your future becomes extraordinary. Every day is a vote. A vote for weakness. Or a vote for strength. A vote for excuses. Or a vote for growth. A vote for obedience. Or a vote for freedom. Choose carefully. Because repeated choices become habits. Repeated habits become character. And character becomes destiny. Before we finish, I want you to remember something. You do not need to become perfect. You simply need to become more aware. More aware of what influences you. More aware of what controls you. More aware of where your attention goes. More aware of what deserves your energy. The moment awareness grows, manipulation weakens. The moment awareness grows, freedom expands. And the moment awareness grows, your mind becomes your own. That is the goal. Not perfection. Freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from approval. Freedom from emotional slavery. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from the habits that keep you small. Because a free mind is one of the most powerful things a human being can possess. Subscribe to the Stoic Path if you are committed to becoming stronger, wiser, calmer, and more disciplined every day. And remember, the world becomes far less intimidating when you realize that the greatest battle was never out there. It was always inside your own mind. Win that battle. And nobody can control you.